All right, welcome back. So, this week we are going to talk a little bit about rhythm, rhyme, and sound. How poetry uses these ideas to create extra meaning, and gives you one more layer of things to consider when you're pulling poems apart. So, let's start with some definitions, as always. Rhythm and rhyme are two things I definitely know you guys have heard before, things you've thought about. But in terms of poetry, I want to get official terms down. So, rhythm, we're going to call the use of stressed and unstressed syllables to make patterns in sound. That's fairly straightforward. It's fairly open-minded. But the idea is simply that some syllables take a little longer to say. Some you can say a little bit quicker. Some you kind of have to put a little more focus on when you're speaking. Others you sort of trip right past. So, by using these natural cadences of language, poets can create specific rhythms that often follow specific patterns. So, the other word that I want to get down, and we'll talk a little bit more why these are useful, is rhyme. And again, I know you know what that means. Just so we're clear, though, rhyme is sounds that correspond in different words. So when two words have corresponding sounds, we're going to talk about specific categories of rhyme specifically. But before we do, I want to get one clear point across. Why do we pay attention to this? Two reasons. A, rhyme and rhythm help us to categorize poems. So if all the poems use a certain rhyme or rhythm scheme, we know that those poems are similar, and in fact, that's one of the ways that you can tell sonnets from other parts of poetry, right? Is they have to follow a certain rhyme and rhythm scheme. This is the case for lots of formal poetry. I'm not going to put a ton of focus on making you memorize the difference between, say, iambic pentameter and trochaic quadrimeter, etc. But I do want you to be aware that if you hear those terms or things like that coming out, what they're referring to is the pattern of stressed and stressed unsyllables in rhyme. That's all that those things refer to. So, that's the first thing, is that rhythm and rhyme help us to categorize poems into various categories. The other thing is that they help us create meaning in poetry. So, by using rhyme and rhythm, we can emphasize certain things or de-emphasize certain things. And we're going to talk about specific ways that that happens in your textbooks. So, before we get going any further, let's learn all of the terms for this week. Get them all out here at the front, and then I want to talk about explaining these a little bit and how you might use them. So, as I mentioned, rhyme comes in various different kinds. The most obvious rhyme is what we might call end rhyme. End rhyme is when two words have the same sound or a very similar sound at the end. So plain and Jane rhyme. That's an end rhyme, right? End rhyme is kind of what people think of as when people think of rhyme, that's what pops into their mind, right? Straightforwardly. This is often used at the end of lines in poetry, but when we say end rhyme, what we're referring to is that the end of the words rhyme, and rhyme precisely. So that's kind of, as I said, it's the most basic form of rhyme. It often helps the ear to hear where lines end and sort of establishes what one unit of rhythm is. So, if we go to maybe the most basic poems, or roses are red, violets are blue, da 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 da, I love you, right? The rhyme lets us know where each line ends. That's going to be the case in a lot of poetry. Okay, so end rhyme. They rhyme really clearly. Obviously, they have the same sound at the end of the word. Next up is off rhyme. Off rhymes are words that almost rhyme, but don't quite. Sort of sometimes this is called like cheating the rhyme. So when words are close to rhyming, but it's not close. A lot of times in poetry, this is done just to sort of increase the rhyme vocabulary. But sometimes this is done really intentionally to sort of indicate a change. So if all of the rhymes are really precise, like rhyme exactly, 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 and then there's one that's off, that might indicate some meaning. So an example of off rhyme. Every rose has its thorn, just like every cowboy sings a sad, sad song. When that's sung, believe it or not, it sounds fairly close to rhyming, even though when you break it down, thorn and song are only very narrowly close to rhyming. So that is off rhyme. Sometimes you'll hear that called near rhyme. It's the same thing. The final kind of rhyme I need you guys to be aware of. So end rhyme, clean rhyme. off rhyme, close but not quite. Next up, I rhyme. I rhyme means it looks like it should rhyme, but it does not when you say it out loud. And my favorite example of this comes from an old poem called The Tiger by William Blake. Maybe you've heard it. It goes, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what a mortal hand or eye could dare to frame thy fearful symmetry. And you can kind of hear it, right? We have a really strong end rhyme in the first couplet, right? Bright runs with night, and those are really clear, obvious rhymes. But the next two lines end with I and symmetry. Now, if you look at the word symmetry on the page next to the word I, they both end with a Y sound, and thus it seems like they ought to rhyme, right? I and symmetry, but that's not how we say that. And that poet does that for a very specific reason, right? If it just rhymed, you could just go on and sort of not think about it. But because it doesn't rhyme and it feels like it really ought to there, right? What immortal hand or eye dare to form thy fearful symmetry? It actually makes you stop and like slow down. And that's actually what the poet wants you to do, because the question he's asking that is, tigers, out in the woods, why would God make something so dangerous? That's sort of the question he's asking. What immortal, i.e. God, hand or eye, dared to make an animal that looks like that, right? And he wants you to stop and think about that and sort of suggest that something so powerful and dangerous kind of doesn't fit into the bigger scheme of things, just like the word symmetry doesn't quite fit into the rhyme scheme. So those are various types of rhyme, and I hope I've also pointed to a little bit where you might get some meaning out of those as well. One last term, it's the last one for this week. If a piece of poetry shows no examples of rhythm or rhyme whatsoever, none at all, you can call that free verse. Free verse means it's free of all noted rhythm and rhyme structure. But I want to make something really clear before we just label stuff as free verse and move forward. The rhyme scheme doesn't have to be super structured, i.e. it can change as long as a poem is still using rhythm or rhyme, and that's still going to qualify as not quite free verse. I bring that up just so that if you're ever asked, hey, does this poem use rhythm or rhyme? Think pretty broadly about that question and sort of lean more towards answering, yeah, it probably does use some form of rhythm or rhyme. Just kind of thinking towards that forward. So the other thing that I wanted to do before we close off in this particular video lecture is kind of show you some of these things in action. So one of the poems you're going to read for me this week is by, and you'll have to forgive me as my book is a little bit out of order. Where's what I want? Cristiana Colon, which is on page 212 in your book. It's called A Remix for Remembrance, and this is an excellent poem to start thinking about rhythm and rhyme and how they work together. So it says, I'm going to read the whole thing really quickly and then just talk about a few lines from it. This is for the boys whose bedrooms are in the basement, who press creases into jean, who carve their names in pavement. The girls whose name are ancient, ancestry is sacred, the Aztec and the Mayan gods Abuela used to pray with. This is for the dangerous words hiding in the pages of composition notes, holy books, and Sanskrit. This is for the patients who wait for medication, for the mothers microwaving beans and rice at day's end. This is for the marching bands and girls at quinceañeras, the skaters and the riders whose moms are eloteras, laughing, cops don't scare us, we sag so elders fear us. We will rewrite our textbooks in our own language if you dare us. This is for the Sarahs, the Angelicas and Shawns, the Beatrice, Paulas, Danielas, and the Dawns. We scribble sunlight in the margins of horizons with our songs, for all the voices tangled with the silence of our tongues. Rivals in the park, fireworks at dark. Tired shirts that sweat your scent on hangers in the closet. For the boys who fix the faucet while their sister fixes coffee, 'cause mommy had to leave for work at 6 a.m. and laundry isn't folded yet. You don't have to hold your breath. You don't have to behave. Stage your own rebellion. Paint canvases with rage and religion and prayers for pilgrims sleeping in the train cars at the borders and their children. Filibust the Senate and bust markers on the pink line. Stain the prosecution's case and force the judge judge to resign. Force the crowd to rewind the lyrics you invented. Speak away the limits to heights of your existence. Be a witness, be a record, be a testament, a triumph. Set your poems flying in the glitter of the planets. Feed open mouths with truth. The truth is we are famished. The universe is starving for the symphonies you play. Clarinets and thunder and the syllables you say are the instruments. You are infinite. Stretch your hands to heaven. Let your throat throttle the rhythms of all your fallen brethren. Your legacy is present. Your history is now. You are the 10th degree of sound. You are the nephews of the sky. You are the bass line and the hi-hat and the snare drum and the cry of red Septembers. You're the architects of winter. You are the builders of the roads that you're told you don't remember. You are the builders of the roads that you're told you don't remember. You are the builders of the roads that you're told you don't remember. Cast poems in the river and tell them you remember. Skate City Hall to splinters and tell them you remember. Send diamonds to your islands and tell them you remember. Find your God inside your mirror and tell her you remember. So, there's a lot going on in this poem. In general, it seems like it's a call to action for the students who are mentioned in this little epigraph up here that I didn't read out loud. But the reason I read this poem out loud for you here is so that you can hear the rhythm and rhyme that's going on. I'm just going to kick to a few specific moments to sort of illustrate what I'm going to, but hopefully you guys recognize that there's a ton more going on here. So first off, we see some really clear end rhyme in points, right? I'm looking at the fourth stanza. This is for the Sarahs, the Angelicas, and Seans, the Beatrice, Paolas, Danielas, and the Dawns. Seans, Dawns. Really straightforward, right? We also see some interesting off rhyme. So this is just the next point down. It says, tired shirts that sweat your scent on hangers in the closet for the boys who fix the faucet while their sister fixes coffee because mommy had to leave at work at 6 a.m. and laundry. So, closet and faucet are pretty close. That's an end rhyme for sure. But coffee and mommy and laundry are all off rhymes. And I think it's sort of interesting that we go from really certain clear rhymes, so closet, faucet, to coffee, mommy, laundry. It's sort of as it goes further and then we bring more and more in, it's harder and harder for the rhymes to be more precise. It's like when you have so much going on your plate, it's harder for you to get everything precisely done. And thus the poem itself reflects the point that it is trying to make there, maybe. This poem also shows us a lot of really cool rhythm. There are parts of this poem where, and I know I just read really fast sometimes, faster than even the poets might when they read these works themselves, but that seem to read pretty fast. Be a witness, be a record, be a testament, a triumph. Set your poems flying in the glitter of the planets. Feed open mouths with truth. The truth is we are famished. Now, there are not a ton of stressed syllables in that. You can let forced stress, things that you cannot say fairly quickly. Be a witness, be a record, be a testament, a triumph. You can kind of da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And since those words sort of force you to read that, it's kind of hard to put that rhythm in a different way when you read be a witness. It goes ba-da-da-da. It's kind of hard to fix that. And that sort of teaches you to read further on. Be a witness, be a record, be a testament, a triumph. Set your poems flying in the glitter of the planets. See how you kind of one line teaches you to read the other? That's the first thing I want you to be aware of here. Your legacy is present. Your history is now. You are the 10th degree of sound. You are the nephews of the sky. Again, we get these really fast syllables with not a lot of forced stress. But then listen what happens in this next line. And this is towards the end of the long stanza on 213. You are the bass line and the hi-hat and the snare drum and the cry of red Septembers. So bass line, hi-hat, snare drum. Those are forced moments of emphasis, right? It's really hard to read that without putting emphasis on one syllable or the other. And in so doing, and using those three terms right next to each other, the poet makes you slow down. You can't read that line as fast as you can the other. And in a poem that seems to be accelerating, as this poem seems to do, at least to me, when you get there, it's sort of like, slow down, hear these words. You are this and this and this. Thereby indicating more of the way that she wants to pull this out. Also, bass line, hi-hat, and snare drum are all three percussion instruments that all kind of make a bottom sound, like you can hear about bass drum, snare drum. Maybe I'm just a little over the line there, but I feel like you can almost hear the instruments that are being named and the way that their names are forced to be said by the rhythm of this poem. So I brought that up to sort of show you the way that rhythm and rhyme can influence the meaning of the words in front of you. I hope that helps a little bit. Questions, comments, concerns? Talk to me. Thanks so much, guys.